Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the debut episode of Talkin Bout the Hoosiers podcast, presented by HoosierIllustrated.com. I'm joined by my two co-hosts, Alec, the founder and owner of HoosierIllustrated.com, and my other co-host, who is the lead basketball recruiting analyst and writer for Hoosier Illustrated, Kyler Saley. I'm Drew Rosenberg, and guys, it's great to be here. How you guys doing?
Great. I'm so pumped. I've been waiting to do this podcast all summer.
I'm doing good. I am glad we are finally getting this going. No better time than obviously right before college football season. Let's have a good season for Indiana football, and then hopefully we can keep building each week with that.
Yeah, you said it, Alec. I mean, we're less than a week away, and Ohio State coming to Bloomington this Saturday. We're gonna have Big Ten predictions for IU. Look at Ohio State. Much more on this episode, but I think we got to start with the last 3-4 years have been kind of weird for Indiana. Alec, last year 4-8 after a 2-10 season, but prior to that 8-5 and 6-2. So do you expect an improvement, or do you expect us to stay where we've been the last 2 years?
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see what happens. Obviously, kind of getting the season started with Ohio State. I think everyone kind of expects that to start off on potentially the wrong foot there with that loss. So there's probably not a lot that you can take from week one, or honestly week two. I think week three is kind of the initial start there for Indiana when they do head obviously to Lucas Oil to play Louisville. But that's probably 3 or 4 other games this year could probably go either way. I think the biggest thing for Indiana is not to regress from the 4-8 record of last year, and anything 4-8 and better, I think is probably going to not only keep Tom Allen's job for an additional year or so, but be something that you can say is pretty much a success. I think 5 wins is the absolute max that they can get this year. It's going to be a difficult road to get there, but it's something that I think with their schedule, the way that it sets up, you do have that potential. But the kind of the back half of Big Ten season there is going to be really difficult. You have the Michigans, Penn States, Michigan State, obviously Purdue, and then Wisconsin as well. That's not going to be any easy task. But I think if you can get a couple wins early on in the season, go into Big Ten play kind of feeling a little bit better than what they have in the past, I think you can sneak out 1 or 2 extra games towards the end of the season that I don't think a lot of people, at least as of now, think you can do, and kind of end right around that 5-win mark.
Yeah, Alec, you kind of alluded to it. Tom Allen's seat is starting to get warm. Kyler, you have any thoughts on that? What do you think of? You think Tom Allen? Do you think this could be his last year at Indiana, or do you think he'll be here for 2024?
I think with Tom Allen, it's bowl game or bust. I've been saying that pretty much all summer. Anybody that wanted to talk Indiana football with me, I think he's got to make a bowl game to save his job. Anything less, I mean, it's just not good for the program. At this point forward, you'll have 3 seasons, losing seasons. I think he's got to get to at least that 6-6 mark. Got to make a bowl. I'm not saying he's got to win the bowl, but he's got to do something. He's got to show some positive signs. With this Indiana football program, with all the changes that are coming in, with the facilities being upgraded and things like that, there's a culture shift a little bit. You can kind of sense it. Is Tom Allen going to be a part of this program moving forward? I think he's got to prove that he can win and he can be Indiana's head coach for the long run. This is a very, very important season for Indiana. One of the most important that the program's ever had. So we'll see what he can do, but he's got to win this year. That's the big thing for him.
Yeah, you touched on it a little bit. You let right into some news with Indiana football. I mean, talked about it, putting more money into the program. There's been some updates to the stadium coming. Talked about the mobile parking and some new updates for Indiana football, which, let's call it out, it's been in need of this for a while. Do you have any thoughts on that, Alex?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that the biggest thing, right, is you need to invest in the program if you want to win, but at the same time, you have to win if you want to continue to invest. And so it's a difficult spot to be in for Indiana and Scott Dolson, because you see what Tom Allen was able to do back in 2019, 2020, and then obviously the past two years have really kind of set the program back to a spot that it probably hasn't been in close to a decade at this point. You could say it's probably in the worst spot that it has been since Tom Allen took over, and definitely even going back in kind of the later stages of Kevin Wilson as well. So it's kind of like Kyler said, you have to win this year. Again, I don't think personally they will be going to a bowl game. There are obviously a lot of different variables that can contribute to that and push them over the edge if they do get there. A lot of that's going to be kind of put behind quarterback play. But at the end of the day, if you're going to expect any other investment in this program, they need to win. They need to do it now. And any other potential losing season, right, is just not going to do anything for the potential growth of the program, both financially and then obviously on the field production as well.
Yeah, and you kind of mentioned it, talking about Tom Allen on the hot seat a bit. If Indiana is to fire him before December 2024, they're going to owe him the remainder of his contract, which is almost $5 million a year up until 2027. So you got to wonder if they can't get the boosters to fund it like they did with Archie Miller, his firing. Does Indiana keep Tom Allen one more year if this season's a disappointment, just so they don't have to pay that large buyout?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting, right? It's a conversation that I hate having before you actually get to that point, because obviously, fresh new season, anything can happen. But it's like we've all touched on here. It's a critical point in not only Tom Allen's tenure, but the future of Indiana football and what the program honestly should be. It hasn't been up to the standards that I think it could potentially get to. And I think, you look back to obviously a couple injuries at the quarterback spot over the last couple of years really set the program back. But at the end of the day, you need to bring in high level talent. You need to obviously be able to keep those guys now with the transfer portal, but you need to be able to flip guys each and every season. And, the mantra of Leo and Tom Allen obviously being such a great guy, at some point, the production needs to be there. No matter how good of a guy he really is. So again, it goes back to how much longer can you just accept obviously way less than mediocrity, and that's going to be the conversation to be had if the season this year goes the way that it had the previous 2 years. So we'll see what happens. I think it's a difficult conversation to have at this point, but it's one that will most likely be had if you don't improve from last year and at least get to 5 wins. Not even talking a bowl game, but just to at least improve. And I think you're going to be set there for at least the next year.
Yeah, with that, I think we're going to have much more talk on Indiana football, the upcoming season, predictions, and Ohio State's big matchup with the Hoosiers on Saturday. But I think we should start with some Big Ten predictions. We've kind of talked about it a bit. Who do you guys have coming out of the Big Ten East and why? Alec, you want to start?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I'll go. I think Michigan, right? I mean, I think this is kind of what Michigan has been setting up for over the past 2 years, right? We're able to get over the hump the past few years, but especially last year, getting to the college football playoff and kind of cementing themselves as kind of that top program back in the Big Ten. I do think Ohio State's going to take a step back from last year. 11-2 going to the college football playoff as well, but the question marks at quarterback I think are going to be a little bit too much to overcome when it comes to Ohio State, and I think Michigan just has way too much firepower. That defense is going to be once again one of the best in the Big Ten and in the country. And then you look at the kind of trio of JJ McCarthy, Blake Corum, and Donovan Edwards, and it's difficult to get better than those three right there, especially those two running backs. And you look at the rest of the skill position players that they have. It's just top to bottom, clearly one of the best teams in the country, and I think they have at the positions that you need, the veterans, the experience, and the production. The proven production that Ohio State does not have. So I think Michigan's definitely the team to beat there in the Big Ten all around, but especially in the Big Ten East.
Yeah, Kyler, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, Alec nailed pretty much, 100% of that. It's Michigan, obviously, until until proven otherwise. I mean, you throw in Ohio State, Penn State, I would expect one of those two teams to compete with Michigan there. Just given, their historic programs and, they're typically really, really good programs. Other than that, I think there's a big drop off in the Big Ten East. I don't see any other team being able to compete with Michigan right now. I don't want to repeat a lot of what Alec said, but I mean, Michigan's a well-oiled machine right now. They come in, they have a pretty sharp team, both sides of the ball. I think they're going to be really tough, and I think they're actually national championship contenders as well. So that I got to go with Michigan.
Yeah, I agree with you guys. I also have Michigan. I think Penn State, you said Ohio State could compete. I think Maryland's going to be very good with Talia Tagovailoa, but I still don't think they're going to be near that level of the Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan. And with Michigan bringing everyone back and having no question marks at quarterback, running back, the O-line's going to be very good. I mean, I think it's got to be Michigan until proven otherwise, like you said. Out on the Big Ten West, though, I think it's a lot more of a crapshoot. Kyler, who do you got winning the Big Ten West?
So I've got Iowa, and I'm not going to sit here and act like I know anything about Iowa football because, I mean, honestly, I don't. But, with the Big Ten West, it's always kind of a toss-up going into the season and everything and just kind of shuffles throughout the year. I feel like, Iowa, from what I'm seeing, is getting a lot of hype there. I think people are pretty high on them. Their offensive scheme, I think, defense should be well. I think from what I see. So I'm going to go with Iowa, but again, it's a toss up. You throw in Minnesota, Wisconsin. Wisconsin's a very interesting team. Illinois is also really interesting. I think there's high hopes for both Wisconsin and Illinois this year, but I think I'm going to give the slight edge to Iowa. I think they have a little bit more coming in.
Alec, who you got out West?
Yeah, I hate to stay on the same wavelength as Kyler here, but I think the addition of Cade McNamara, this is kind of the first time in quite some time that Iowa's going to have truly a game changer at the quarterback position. We know that offense has, especially the last 2 years, really struggled to score the ball. That kind of goes hand in hand with having one of the better defenses, not only in the Big Ten, but the entire country. So I think as long as you have a quarterback who can stretch the field, can make some plays with his arm, which is what Cade McNamara can do, that's going to be really difficult to beat. I think Wisconsin, obviously Luke Fickell. You have Phil Longo, who I think is probably one of the most underrated additions across college football, and his ability, what he did at North Carolina as the offensive coordinator. So, we'll see what they can do. Obviously, another school with the transfer quarterback coming in, as is Illinois. We'll see. I think that's going to be a very difficult division with a lot of really good teams in comparison to kind of what it has been over the last couple of seasons. But I think Iowa's the team to beat there. But would not be shocked to see Wisconsin come out of there at the end of the season.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to agree with you guys again and have three same predictions again, but I do also have Iowa. You mentioned Cade McNamara. That's the reason. Iowa's last year, they stayed in games with one of the worst offenses in college football. I think their defense is going to be good again, and I think Cade's going to help that offense a lot. And I also just think there's so much uncertainty out west. Illinois could be good. Wisconsin with Luke Fickell, as you mentioned. It's really a crapshoot, and there could about 5-6 teams that could come out of the West, and I'd be like, oh, okay. Would not be shocked. Unlike the Big Ten East, if it was anyone other than the Big Three, I'd be a little surprised, or be very surprised. So with that said, who do you guys have winning the Big Ten, Michigan or Iowa? Kyler, you want to start?
Yeah, it's Michigan. Like I said earlier, I think they're national championship contenders. I think they're just, I have Iowa and Michigan in my championship game. I mean, Michigan's just got, from a talent level, I think they just got a lot more. They're well oiled, like I mentioned. So I got to go with Michigan.
Alec?
Yep, Michigan. I think we've all discussed the ability that they have both on the offensive and defensive side of the ball. I think Michigan's just too good. This year we'll see if that obviously pans out, and what they were able to do last year kind of really jump started that program back to what it should be. But I do think they are national championship contenders, and would not be shocked to not only see them in the final game of the regular season, final game of the postseason, I should say, but hoisting the trophy there at the end of the year.
Yeah, I'm going to keep it short because I also have Michigan for this very similar reasons. I see this team as a national contender. I think they're going to get to the playoff, and with that being said, do you guys see, because it sounds like you guys all have Michigan making the playoff. Am I right to say that?
Yep.
Yep.
Do you have any other Big Ten team possibly making the playoff?
Not
Alec?
me. Oh, sorry.
No, yeah, I don't. Like I said, I think Ohio State's gonna take a step back this year. With the inconsistency there at quarterback, we'll see how that actually pans out. And I just don't think the Big Ten's gonna be able to get two in there. We'll see what happens, but I think it's just Michigan.
Yeah, so this is where I finally differ from you guys, but I think Ohio State will get in, but I think it's going to be the winner of Ohio State, Penn State. I think that matchup's going to be the second Big Ten team to get in. I think like we underestimate, say, Ohio State new quarterback, but we said that with Stroud, said that with Justin Fields. Every time Ohio State seems to have a new quarterback, it does not seem to matter. That offense is always electric. I think they have the best player in the country in Marvin Harrison Jr. And I would not be shocked to see them get in at all. And I think they will if a Big Ten is able to get two teams in, and I think it will be Ohio State. So with that said, I think we should just go to our college football playoff predictions. Kyler, do you want to start it off with yours, your four teams and your winner?
Yeah, so I've got Georgia, Michigan, Alabama. I'm going to throw in Washington. I feel like there's always that one kind of outlier, that outcast team. I think that's Washington this year. I'm real high on Michael Penix. I think he's going to have a phenomenal season with them. You know, may win the Heisman. We'll see. But I like that group of four. I really wanted to put LSU in that fourth spot, but I really don't see three SEC teams being in there. I'm a little high on LSU this year. I think they're going to be really good, sneaky fun too. But I'm going to go with I think I'm going to go with Georgia to win it all. Even though I've said Michigan, you know, national championship contenders, I think Georgia, you know, until proven otherwise, they are the team to beat.
Alec, who you got? Who's your four and who you got as a winner?
Yep, I think at least a couple of them are. I don't want to say any team's a true shoe-in, but I do think Georgia and Michigan absolutely would be shocking not to see them in there come the end of the year. So I have those two. I think USC is going to be able to get out of the Pac-12 there in their last season before joining the Big Ten. I do like Alabama to come out from the SEC as well. But I do think Washington could be a potential dark horse there. Obviously, Michael Penix, former IU quarterback that everyone knows about very much so, and the ability that he has, the season that he had last year. I would love to see him kind of back in the national limelight there after kind of the tough couple of years that he had to end his Indiana career.
Yeah, I have similar picks. I got Georgia, Michigan, USC, and Ohio State. But with that fourth spot with Ohio State, you mentioned them, Kyler, LSU. I think they're going to be very good. Jaden Daniels is a dog. I think they could easily get that fourth spot. I think there's going to be either two Big Ten, two SEC teams. I just give Ohio State the slight edge because Brian Kelly loses some big games every once in a while, and I could see that happening once again. I think Michigan finally gets over the hump this year. I think it's just one of those weird years when guys have like a suspension or something like that. Like when Tom Brady got suspended for 4 games, the Patriots won the Super Bowl that year. I think it could be something similar with Michigan and Harbaugh's suspension that could fire that team up. They could rally around that. And I think this could be the year they finally get over the hump.
Yeah, I will say I do like LSU. They have all the talent there, but I am never going to trust the Brian Kelly team at all. That just has never panned out. And I do not see that happening this year again.
With that, I mean, I think we should get to the Heisman winner. This is, I mean, the biggest award in college football. The elite class of players. Caleb Williams, the defending champ, is back at USC. Alec, who you got winning the Heisman?
So I believe if USC does win out in the Pac-12 and makes the college football playoff, I do think it's going to be Caleb Williams. Obviously, the talent's there, the hype is there. Those are two things that are pretty difficult to overcome. As long as you can kind of live up to those expectations, I think that's going to be the guy. We all know how quarterbacks tend to get the extra love when it comes to the voting. So I think that's going to be the case with the assumption that USC does get out of the Pac-12 and get into the college football playoff.
Kyler, who you got for your Heisman?
Yeah, it's Caleb Williams. I mean, Alec again touched on a lot of good stuff. He's just awesome. He's the best quarterback. in college football right now. I think he's gonna have a phenomenal year. He looked really good already in their week 0 game. I think he had about 4 touchdowns, somewhere around there. It's just another one of those things. Until proven otherwise, he is the best. You could throw in a lot of guys, like I mentioned, Michael Penix. I think he could be kind of, in that fringe level right there. There's a lot of hype around him. Marvin Harrison Jr. is another one, that can sneak up there. But I think Caleb Williams is going to be back-to-back Heisman winner. I just really do.
Yeah, you mentioned my guy. I got Marvin Harrison Jr. I think he's the best receiver. I think he's the best player in college football. I think if wide receiver was valued the same as quarterback, he'd be a shoo-in for the #1 pick. I just think he's so talented. Last year when Smith-Njigba missed time, he stepped into that #1 role and was unbelievable for Ohio State. But I think there's some other guys, some dark horses. Bo Nix is another guy. Jaden Daniels at LSU. Drake May at North Carolina. There's a ton of guys who could win the Heisman. And one guy who I don't think can win just because of his position, but just deserves some hype is Brock Bowers at Georgia. I think he's one of the best tight ends that's come out of college football in the last decade. Really special player.
Bo Nix. I like that. That's a dark horse one right there.
I mean, Oregon's supposed to be good, so why not? If Oregon can somehow win the Pac-12 and Bo Nix is great like he was last year, why not a Heisman for him?
What is this, a 7th year in college? Something like that?
Yeah. Kind of on his Brad Davison type vibe. So with that, I think we should move to Indiana's season this year. And there's only one place to start with Indiana football, and it's the quarterback position. We've talked about it in writing. We've talked about it over the phone. Who do you guys think is going to start? Alec, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, and I think, not to ruin anything here, I think we all three kind of are in agreement through some of the fall camp articles that we've put up. Everything's kind of been directed at Taven Jackson being the guy. And I think, right, I mean, the hype that came in with Taven Jackson, obviously getting him in the offseason from Tennessee, having the legacy with being Trace Jackson Davis's brother, the talents there, the potential, the upside, and that's the biggest thing that I think Indiana needs at the quarterback spot is the potential and the upside. And I just think he raises that, not only the ceiling, while the floor may be a little bit less sturdy with Taven Jackson, that potential is just something that I think you can't overlook. Better dual threat quarterback, which is something that Indiana really needs. I just think overall the athleticism is a little bit more than what Brendan Sorsby can bring to the table. But I do think that it's one that needs to be made with Taven Jackson leading that team. And one thing that I think was pretty critical that Tom Allen said throughout fall camp was Taven Jackson just brought a different kind of mindset, different kind of confidence, in a moxie to that offense. And even if things aren't going well, if you believe in that quarterback, you can do a few other things that maybe you wouldn't be capable of. So I think just strictly due to the confidence, the moxie there, you do have to go with him and just bring that additional upside potential that you otherwise wouldn't get with potentially Brendan Sorsby.
Yeah, Kyle, anything to add?
Yeah, it's Taven Jackson. There's a reason why you went out and got him if you're Tom Allen. I mean, he's a guy that you desperately needed in your program behind center. Obviously, I think a lot of it comes down to the offensive line with Taven Jackson. But luckily, he's the type of quarterback that can extend the play like that. He's going to make mistakes, which is fine. He's a redshirt freshman quarterback, but he brings an amount of upside to this Indiana football program that they haven't seen in a long time, ever since, a healthy Michael Penix was in an Indiana uniform. Taven's really good. I mean, there's a reason he went to Tennessee. He comes home. He's going to be a hometown favorite. I think he's going to bring the Indiana fan base together, in a positive way. So it's Taven Jackson. I think he's got a better upside than what Brendan Sorsby has. And I think he's going to be really, really special for Indiana in the long term.
Yeah, I agree with you guys. I'm going to keep it short and simple. I mean, it's Taven Jackson. He's the guy you brought in the offseason. He was the hype transfer, got people excited for the season. Even if he hasn't been as good as what you thought, I mean, he's a redshirt freshman. He's only going to get better, and you got to go with Taven Jackson. But there is a third quarterback in this battle who's won't be ready till midseason. That's Dexter Williams II, who hurt his knee last year, missed pretty much the last game of the year, and was the starter at the end of the year and led Indiana to a big win on the road against Michigan State. Do you guys see Dexter Williams II taking the job once he gets back? Tyler, I'm going to start with you.
That's a tough question, honestly. For me, it's just like, I guess it really depends. How's Taven Jackson or potentially Brendan Sorsby? How are they doing at that point in the season when Dexter Williams is back? I think Tom Allen obviously confirmed it. He's not going to be ready for the first 3 games at least, I would say. It's a tough question to answer for me personally. In hindsight, or not in hindsight, but like just kind of predicting, I would say no for right now. I think if you go with especially Taven Jackson, you got to let him play. You got to let him learn everything. But then again, you look back, Tom Allen's fighting for his job, potentially. So he may be desperate to make a change there, but I just don't know if Dexter Williams, even when he is available to play, is he going to be 100% healthy? Do you take that chance for him to get injured again? I just don't know. It's a tough question to answer, but for right now, I'm just going to go no. Don't insert him. Let Taven Jackson run the show.
Alec, what do you think?
Yeah, I think the injury that he had, the kind of injuries that he has in a short time at Indiana. I think it's something that going into this offseason, there was really no expectation that he was going to be ready at all for this year. They obviously went into the offseason, went into fall camp kind of expecting that it was going to be either Brendan Sorsby, Taven Jackson for the majority of the season. I think unless you really do see the wheels fall off, I don't envision seeing Dexter Williams take over as the starter. Now there could be some potential to include him in some different packages that I know Walt Bell would love to have another versatile quarterback out on the field. But that's something that is probably only if the wheels do fall off on the season and you see a really, really bad losing streak, or you see any sort of injury that happens. I think Indiana wants to get away from using 2, 3, 4 quarterbacks like they did last year, and really put kind of all their tools into whatever that starter would be. And I think, again, at the end of the day, that's going to be Taven Jackson. And you're just going to have to kind of roll with the punches with him and have a lot of good moments and probably a lot of bad moments. But at the end of the day, I just don't think you're going to fall back going from Taven Jackson to Brendan Sorsby to Dexter Williams, because I just don't think that would be a great look on Tom Allen coming into this season, being very noticeably excited about the quarterback battle that he did have with those two, to fall back on Dexter Williams, who missed a large majority of the offseason, not taking any of those first team reps in fall camp. I think that would just be a bad message to send to everyone that that was the route that you had to go.
Yeah, I think if Dexter Williams is the Dexter Williams from last year, I could see it. I could see if, as you said, the wheels fall off, if Taven or Sorsby, whoever does start struggles, I could see it. But I think it's unlikely unless it's, as you said, the wheels fall off and it becomes really bad to the point Indiana has no chance at a bowl game and you're just throwing stuff at a wall hoping something sticks. So it'll be really interesting. I think we should get into the record predictions. So Indiana, the line according to DraftKings, it is 3.5 wins, the over/under. Alec, what do you think Indiana's record is going to be, and what do you project is the biggest game of the season for Indiana?
Yeah, I kind of touched on it earlier. I do think they have a potential path to 5 wins. Not going to be easy at all. But I do think that path is there. We just touched on it. Obviously, a lot of that's going to kind of be on the shoulders of that quarterback play, and how consistent they can be throughout the entirety of the season. If you start and end with the same quarterback, I think that 5 wins is there. If we see a lot of movement, I just don't see that potential happening. But because of that biggest swing game, I think a lot of people have touched on this is probably that Louisville game. For me, that's pretty much when the season actually starts, right? I don't think you're going to learn a lot against Ohio State. I don't think you're going to learn a lot against Indiana State. So going to Lucas Oil, playing Louisville in a pretty big non-conference matchup, which has kind of had a heightened hype around it with kind of the official ending of that series after this year is what people are projecting at this point. And then obviously Jeff Brom being making the transition from Purdue to Louisville as well. That rivalry is still going to kind of shift over between Tom Allen and Jeff Brom, and I think that's a game that if you're Indiana and you want any shot of improving on that record from a season ago, that's a game that you absolutely have to win, especially being a almost pseudo home game for them in Lucas Oil.
Yeah, Kyle, you seem to be the biggest on Indiana, like possible success this year. What do you got for the record and biggest game?
Yeah, so I'm a little bit more optimistic than you guys. I got him at 6-6, a pretty respectable record. You know, like Alex said, the path's there for them to win some games. Obviously, Indiana State, Akron, you know, those are 2 guaranteed wins. Then you look at the other games. I think they beat Michigan State. I think they can beat Rutgers. I think their only true road game win is going to be at Purdue this year. Not entirely sold on Purdue, but you know, I think all of us agree the biggest game of the season is the Louisville game. Alec said it's when the season officially gets started. You know, Ohio State, Indiana State, you know, as long as Indiana is competitive in Ohio State, I think that's what you want to see. Indiana State just doesn't have the talent level to compete with a Power 5, Power 4 team like Indiana, but that Louisville game is very, very important. I am not bought into the hype that is surrounding Louisville this year. I feel like they've been kind of, you know, as you know, people are kind of putting them as underdogs, you know, a team that can really surprise a lot of people. I'm not bought into it. Tom Allen knows Jeff Brom really well. This is pretty much a home game for Indiana. Even though there is going to be some great Louisville fans, it's going to be a great atmosphere. It's so important, and I think you could bring a lot of positivity to the program, especially this season, if you were to beat Louisville in a neutral setting. So I got Indiana at 6-6, making it to a bowl, potentially saving Tom Allen's job.
Yeah, I'm the lowest on Indiana right now at 4-8. Still hitting that over though. But you said it. I think we all have that Louisville game is the biggest one of the year. I mean, you guys said it it's all the reasons. I'm not really going to touch on it because you guys have pretty much got it all. But Indiana, I could see a path to being 6-6. I could also see them being 2-10. It's just one of those things where like you got to take care of those big games. Indiana State, Akron are games they should win. If they don't win this season, it's going to be a complete failure. But you have the Rutgers game, Michigan State, Purdue, Louisville. Those are all very winnable games. Maryland's going to be very good, but I could see Indiana competing in that game. But I think the only games I really think the Hoosiers win now, looking at that record, outside of Indiana State, Akron, I think it's Michigan State and Rutgers. I think Michigan State's going to have a bad year. I just don't think they have the talent to compete in the Big Ten. I think Mel Tucker had a great first year, and ever since then, it's been a disaster, and I don't see that disaster getting any better at this point in the season.
How disrespectful is that 3.5 win total by Vegas? I mean, that's a pretty low number for a team like Indiana. Even with
is it
like Indiana? I don't know. I mean, I
is
feel
it?
like
I don't know. I think that's
really
I think that's a pretty. I think that's a pretty good number. I mean, if you look at last year, right? I mean, I think they got extremely lucky in that Michigan State game. How many games can you throw for 7 yards and come out victorious in? So if they typically probably 9 out of 10 times are going to lose that game. So if you do that, you know, you flip that to 3 wins and you're under there. So I don't know. I think it's the state of the program, the question marks with the quarterback spot, and a lot of the new faces that are coming in that have yet to play for Indiana. Trying to mesh all those guys together, I think it's going to be a tall task, and I don't. It's going to be difficult. I do think again what I just said, that 5 wins is there, but I think 3.5 is a good line for me.
I don't know. I mean, you can be bad. You can be really, really bad and still win 4 games in the season. I don't know. I think it's a way low number. My question is, what is Northwestern's line right now at? I mean, are they going to be worse than Indiana, or is Vegas projecting them to be better? You know, same with Rutgers. They know what are those guys' programs? What are their lines? But I don't know. I think the 3.5 is a little low. I think if I'm Vegas, I would have put it at 4.5, you know, a game up, but that's just me.
Yeah, so Northwestern is at 3 flat, but it's important to know with Indiana's line, it is projected at 4. the over 3.5 is -140, so their implied win total is 4 on the year, but which makes sense as I can see Vegas not believing in Indiana as much as we would.
Man, Vegas is rough
in many ways.
in many ways, right?
I think we should turn to Saturday's big matchup with Ohio State. I think the first place we got to start, though, is it has been announced that Kyle McCord and Devin Brown are both going to play. Alec, what are your thoughts on that for Ohio State?
Yeah, I think going into this matchup, right, that was kind of widely known that both of them are going to get some snaps in some capacity. Kyle McCord is going to be the guy starting for Ohio State, but again, would expect a heavy dose of both of them throughout the game. Obviously, depending on the score as well, you maybe see a little bit more Devin Brown than potentially both. But yeah, I think that's as to be expected. I think it's going to be a difficult time for Indiana, regardless. I think the one good thing about coming into this matchup with one new starter, at least in two, if you bring in Devin Brown to play as well, who has really not had any time for the Buckeyes, is you also have a refreshed Ohio State offensive line. And if I look at any matchup on the field that could be tilted in Indiana's favor, I think you look at that kind of front seven matchup for Indiana, the pass rush going up against that offensive line with three new starters, and I believe a potential redshirt freshman on the offensive line for Ohio State. And you talk about Andre Carter. Linnell Carr has been a huge standout for Indiana this fall camp. Anthony Jones coming in from Oregon. Obviously, we know what Aaron Casey's been able to do. Philip Bleedy. So there's a lot of guys that Indiana has now brought in to be major pass rushers. And I do think, if anything, this could be a potential matchup to tilt in Indiana's favor and kind of get that quarterback play a little uneasy for Ohio State.
Yeah, Kyler, you got anything to add on that?
Yeah, as far as matchups, I mean, I think the Ohio State wide receiver unit versus that young Indiana secondary, that's something to watch for. That young Indiana secondary, who I think is mostly made of sophomores and redshirt freshmen, they're going to have a tall task against that really, really good Ohio State wide receiver unit, especially when you got Marvin Harrison going at them. They do have Noah Pierre back. That's a big help as far as leadership goes. I mean, he'll be expected to really carry a load there. A lot. I assume he'd be matched up with their top wide receiver, probably Marvin Harrison Jr. Probably matched up with him a lot. But that's going to be a challenge for the young Indiana secondary for sure. I'm just curious to see if they're up for the fight, up for the task.
Yeah, we've talked a ton about Marvin Harrison Jr., but I think there's some other receivers we gotta talk about too. Emeka Egbuka, another very good receiver, was the #1 receiver in his class and top 10 in his class in 2021. Julian Fleming, who's the #4 player, #1 receiver in his class too. Ohio State is deep. Brian Hartline just brings in talent year after year and just sends them into the NFL, where they go on to be studs over the last 5-10 years. I don't think anyone has put together more successful wide receivers in the NFL than Ohio State.
Yeah, I think it's going to be difficult, obviously, especially for this Indiana secondary. I think Tom Allen talked about it. The biggest thing is try to limit those major explosive plays. Unfortunately, I think that's going to be easier said than done. Indiana's going to give up a lot of yards in this one, but I do think if you're able to get the pass rush that I think Indiana will be able to get, that could potentially offset some of that potential success or lack thereof in the secondary for Indiana. But if they're not able to get any sort of disruption in the backfield there, a long day is going to turn into an even longer day for that secondary. Obviously, a lot of guys, JoJo Johnson, Jameer Johnson, are two guys expected to kind of step up into big roles this season from the transfer portal. Kobe Minor as well. So you definitely have some talent back there. Tom Allen even talked about Jamari Sharp, a redshirt freshman who was making his way as a potential starter throughout most of fall camp. So you have the talent. You just have a lot of inexperience and adding in a new play caller as well. Even the guys who were back from last year obviously have to adjust to that. So, this is probably not the best matchup that you want from that unit to start their 2023 season. But at the end of the day, I think it's one that if you have any success, it's going to carry over because you're not going to see a better group of wide receivers in any matchup on any roster for the remainder of the season after week 1.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think we should go into some key players. Kyler, who do you see is a key factor for Indiana if they're going to pull off the upset?
I think it's Andre Carter. I'm gonna go with him. I feel like there's obviously a lot of hype with him. He's one of the top transfers, Indiana got this year. It sounds like by all accounts, all the reports, he's made an immediate impact, in this offseason. And I think he's gonna lead that Indiana unit, this year, that pass rushing unit. I think he's gonna have a really, really good showing, a really good debut in Indiana Hoosiers uniform. The offensive line for Ohio State, a little bit of questions there. I think he takes advantage of that. I think he's going to make a lot of key plays and hopefully take a lot of pressure off of the Indiana secondary. That way, Marvin Harrison Jr., he can't break out for those big plays or whatever. And then the quarterbacks, Kyle McCord, Devin Brown, you hope that they struggle and you hope that they feel that pressure from Andre Carter. So I'm going to go with him. I think he's going to be a stud for Indiana all season long. I think he's going to have a really big debut here.
Alec, who's your key player for Indiana?
Yeah, I think we haven't talked a lot about the Indiana offense. Obviously, the go-to name there is going to be Jalen Lucas, but really interested to see what these Indiana wide receivers can do. Right, DeKeys Carter, EJ Williams come in from the transfer portal, expected to play significant roles right away, and playmaking ability and explosive opportunities for Indiana was very much lacking a season ago. We'll see Cam Camper obviously back with the assumption that he's going to be at full health, which by all reports is that's going to be the case. So you have a lot of weapons there offensively. Comes from a Ohio State defense that did really struggle in the back half of the season with explosive plays, especially against obviously Georgia, Michigan, two entirely different teams when you look at personnel than Indiana. But Indiana now has some playmakers on the offensive side of the ball. And I think if that offensive line is going to be even just remotely close to what they've talked about in fall camp, I do think it's a potential to at least move the ball down the field. Obviously, that'll help the Indiana defense stay off the field and potentially, have some decent success there offensively. So I think it's going to be a combination of EJ Williams and DeKeys Carter.
Yeah, you mentioned my guy who I think is going to be a key guy to watch, Jalen Lucas. Impacts the game in so many ways in the return game, as a receiver, as a running back. But I think Indiana's the front four of Ohio State is a potential weakness. I don't think it's a weakness per se, but it's more so they don't have the depth they have at other positions. And that could be an issue as you get late in ball games. And a Jalen Lucas, a guy with his type of speed and explosiveness, could break one off late in the game and make something happen for Indiana and really break open a game and change momentum. And because if Indiana is going to beat Ohio State, they're going to need some big plays. They're going to need a spark on offense, and Jalen Lucas is that spark for this offense.
Yeah, they're talented up front, very very talented, but they do have a lot of youth in the back half of that depth chart. So it will be interesting to see. I know a lot of guys are kind of stepping into new roles there for Ohio State, but you still have the talent there. If that Indiana offensive line has, like I said, even a remotely similar game to what's been talked about them, I think that's going to go a long way in the future success of this program this year. But it will be interesting. They will be tested. I think you're going to see a lot of different ways to get Jalen Lucas the ball, but you're also going to see a lot of ways to use him as a decoy and try to get him out in open space and utilize his quickness there, obviously.
Yeah, I think when we're talking about Indiana's offense, we got to talk about Tommy Eichenberg at linebacker for Ohio State. Walt Bell talked about him. He's a game wrecker. Last season in 2022, led the Buckeyes in tackles with 120, 12 tackles for loss, had a pick six, 2.5 sacks. This guy's a monster. He's a redshirt or fifth-year senior, I believe, and has the potential to completely wreck a game for opposing offense. Kyler, what does Indiana need to do to prevent him from wrecking the game?
I think it's simple. Offensive line's gonna have to step up. They're gonna have to, really show improvement from last year. I think, with the hire and the offensive line coach hire over the season, I think he's gonna bring out the best out of this offensive line. Indiana for years that I can remember always just had a really, really good offensive line. That was kind of their core. That was something that they would brag about. The past 2 seasons has not been that. They're going to have to step up. I mean, that like you mentioned, he's a game wrecker. I mean, that's what he's going to do, and he's going to get his. I mean, there's no question about that. But that offensive line's got to be able to just slow him down just a little bit. They're going to have to give Taven Jackson or Brendan Sorsby, whoever it's going to be, going to have to give them time to make plays. Extend the play. It's going to be a tough challenge, but that offensive line's really, really got to step up.
Alec, what do you think? Eichenberg's impact?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's been the leader of that defense for quite some time. The production's always been there. The effectiveness has always been there. I think, for the most part, in terms of rushing the passer, it's going to be more felt from those DNs. But when you look at his impact, right, I mean, that's going to be middle of the field, probably sideline to sideline there in the first kind of 5 to 7 yards outside of the line of scrimmage. Indiana, though, I do think has the quickness at those skill positions to be able to utilize that to their advantage. Again, I think Walpell's going to do a much better job this year in year 2 with a revamped offensive line, and having the guys that I think he wants at the key positions to be able to utilize that quickness and athleticism that Indiana's really not had. You pretty much have to go back to probably a good 5 or 6 years to actually get the depth at this position, at the wide receiver position, from top to bottom. And again, I think that's going to be extremely critical to get those guys in open space and utilize that quickness come Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, both the points you guys made, I agree completely. It's going to come down to the O-line, but also getting guys in space and getting guys in position to make plays on offense for Indiana. Rather than asking you guys who we think is going to win, it's a 29.5 point spread. The over-under is 59.5 in this game. I'm going to start with the over-under. Alec, you think game goes over 59.5 or under?
Yeah, I think it goes over. I think it's going to be kind of difficult to keep it under. I think Ohio State's going to get theirs, but I do think Indiana's going to be able to put some points on the board. So I think it's definitely over.
Kyler, what about you?
I'm going to go under. For some reason, in my gut feeling, it's week 1. I feel like it's going to be kind of an uglier game. You just don't know what to expect from Indiana offensive wise. Ohio State could really run away with this game. That'll be no surprise. But I mean, and also Indiana could, not put up any points on the board. You just don't know. I think 60 is a little high right now for a week 1 game like this. With just a lot of questions in there. I like the under in this one, a little Debbie Downer. No one likes the under there. But I just expect just kind of an uglier game than what many expect.
Yeah, I'm going to have to agree with Alec over on the over. Last year, Ohio State put up 56 points on Indiana by themselves. I think with it being a fall game, early season, the weather being a lot nicer, it's going to be a lot easier to throw the ball for these teams. And I think as a result, we'll see a little more scoring. And I could see Ohio State scoring 50 points. And that's just nothing about Indiana's defense. It's just completely about how good Ohio State's offense can be. So the spread is 29.5 points in favor of Ohio State. Alec, who do you got on that side?
Yeah, I think I am going to take Indiana plus 29.5. Again, I think it's going to be. I do think it's going to be a little bit more of an ugly game, as Kyler said, but I don't think it's going to be. You look at the 4 of the last 5 matchups have been right around that 28-point mark. So by no means do I think it's going to be a very close game, but I do think Indiana is going to do enough to make sure that it's under 30 points, and definitely under 29 there when you bring it back. So I'm going Indiana with the points there.
Tyler, what about you?
Yeah, I agree with Alec on that one. I'm going to take Indiana plus the points. I think the Hoosiers are going to come out, a lot more competitive than what people are going to expect them to be. I think it'll be somewhat, I'm not saying it's going to be super close, but it'll be somewhat close, heading into the fourth quarter, I think. I still like Ohio State to win by at least 2 touchdowns, somewhere around there. But I think IU's going to play with enough fire, with enough competitiveness to be able to cover that spread.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I could see it. I think 29.5 points, it's a lot. 29.5 points, it's a lot to cover. I just am not sure. I think Ohio State, I think the firepower, I think with it being the first start for who we project will be Taven Jackson, but could be Sorsby, I think it makes it very difficult on Indiana's offense. I think Ohio State covers the 29.5. I've been back and forth, but as of right now on Tuesday at 6:40 p.m., I think Ohio State will cover the 29.5 points.
That's a lot of points, Drew. That's a lot of points for week 1.
It is, and I don't feel great about that pick either, but that's why you got to wait till Saturday to see. Is there anything else you guys want to talk about before we wrap up the show?
Yeah, man, I think just the biggest thing for Indiana right this year in total is just be competitive. Put a good product on the field. I think is the biggest thing for them, and if they can do that, they'll probably squeeze out a couple extra wins than what some people probably aren't expecting. But as long as they're competitive, I think that's the biggest thing, and what typically all fans want to see that Indiana's really struggled with over the past 2 seasons.
Tyler, anything else you want to add before we wrap up?
I mean, big thing is Indiana's not going to win this game, but they got to be competitive. They really do. They got to show some improvement from a season ago. They got to show some positivity into this group. You got to keep the fans invested with this. So if they come out with a fire, with a sense of desperateness, anything could happen. They can keep it close. They're not going to win the game, but they just got to be competitive throughout the entire, the majority of the game.
Yeah, I mean, I agree completely. This isn't a game you're looking to win. I mean, you obviously want to win every game, but it's Ohio State, the number 3 team in the country. You're starting a redshirt freshman quarterback. You're probably not going to win. So it's about finding some positives from this game. And if you can do that and use those positives moving forward, it could do a lot for this season. So with that said, I think that's a wrap on the podcast on this episode. Thank you so much for listening to the Talkin Bout the Hoosiers podcast presented by HoosierIllustrated.com. We'll be back next week with thoughts on week 1 and Indiana's matchup with Ohio State, breaking down the matchup with Indiana State, any news and notes from Tom Allen, Walt Bell, the coaches, and the rest of the team. And with that said, thank you for listening. We'll be back next week.